Last month, we reviewed the Adam T8V studio monitors and we were really impressed with the amount of bang they pack for the buck, especially once we'd dampened the plastic front baffles. Adam liked our video and our fiery intro went viral around their offices, so they sent us a pair of their flagship S-series monitors to check out, the S3H. Let's get the disclosure out of the way as always. No money has changed hands for this video, so we are completely non-sponsored and free to give our honest opinion. And whilst Adam did send us a pair of the S3Hs for review, we've unfortunately got to send them back. And that's a real shame because they sit very nicely atop our ATCs, and with the standing desk we reviewed last month, we can sit and listen on the ATCs and then stand and listen on the Adams. It's been really interesting to compare these directly with the ATCs, and in particular the ATC SCM45, which has a similar form factor but a much higher price tag, and we'll be discussing this later in this video. But let's first have a look at the specs of the S3H, and then we'll move on to how they sound and the secret ingredient that very few people are talking about that can really up the performance of these monitors. The Adam S3 is available in both the H version, the H denoting horizontal form factor, and the V or vertical. The S3H retails at $2,499 plus VAT in the UK per speaker, and the S3V comes in a little cheaper at £2,166 plus VAT at the time of filming, and only features a single bass driver unit. The S3H has two 7-inch bass drivers, each powered by their own 500 watt Class D amplifier, reproducing frequencies as low as 30 Hz. In between these is Adam's own DCH hybrid cone dome mid-range driver, powered by a further 300 watts of Class D amplification, and the handmade S-Art Air Motion transformer tweeter the brand are so well known for, powered by 50 watts for a total of 1,350 watts of Class D PWM amplification. Both the mid and tweeter sit in their own custom waveguides. Crossover points are at 250 Hz and 3 kHz, and the S-series feature custom designed inbuilt DSP that optimizes the loudspeaker crossovers before the amplification stage to create a linear response across the entire audible range, as well as offering the end user options for equalizing to taste and in-room tuning or voicing functions. This is adjustable using either the built-in rotary encoder found on the back panel or via USB using Adam's own software front end. More on this a little later in the video. Inputs are on balanced XLR or digitally via AES. The cabinets are very well constructed, feel completely inert, and have a good quality black finish that seems very resistant to finger marks. I personally like the slightly menacing aesthetic and the stealthy visual vibe of the S3H. They look like they mean business straight out of the box. Let's have a look at the DSP functionality on offer.
Okay, so maybe this is the difference between a grumpy old traditionalist brain and a fresh young millennial one, but there is only one thing I want the DSP section in this speaker to do. I want it to f*** off. Firstly, adjusting it from the back panel with the single rotary encoder / push button affair is an unintuitive faff, and secondly, they sound a lot better in a well-treated room in the flat or pure mode than they do tweaked to death in a bad sounding room, and that's my main bugbear with all this DSP tweakability. If I go to ATC or PMC or Kerr Acoustic, I have enough trust in the brands to know that when I get their products out of the box, that is how a speaker should sound. And what it definitely doesn't need is the end user faffing around the back, tweaking everything away with DSP settings to try and compensate for their room. In the same way as, say, I buy a video monitor for color grading and I want that to tell me exactly what red, green and blue should look like straight out of the box. I don't want to be able to adjust them. When looking at monitors that have such functionality, I just want one switch, and that's a bypass one.
Okay, so Mark is right about the back panel input control being a few buttons short of ideal, but we can plug the monitors into a computer via USB, download the free software front end from Adam's website, and then tweak away to our heart's content should we wish to. The software gives us one knob per function control over input source, volume, delay, presets, high and low shelf, as well as 6-band parametric EQ and firmware updates. But I'd agree with Mark and say that to my ears, in a well-treated environment, the S3H sounded much better in the default flat pure setting. There is one function in the S3H that's missing from the other monitors in the S range, and that's the ability to load a preset that mimics the voicing of Adam's classic S3A monitors. But the S3H sound a lot better, so I'm not sure why you'd want to do that. So how do they sound? Back to Mr. Grumpy Jaws.
They sound very, very good. At their pure setting, the low end is fast, deep, accurate, and really very impressive. The mid-range is surprisingly detailed and revealing, and the tweeter sounds a lot better than the Adam A77Xs I used for many a year in a previous studio. They could become quite fatiguing to listen to for extended periods, and the S3H doesn't bear that hallmark at all. If you don't like the traditional Adam tweeter sound, you might actually like these. You should still check these out. Other improvements over the Adams of old can clearly be heard in the cabinet design, and particularly with the front ports. There has clearly been a lot of development poured into these, and they don't exhibit any of the bad characteristics front ports can be guilty of at all. Crank up the older A series, for example, and you could pretty much dry your hair, if you had hair, in the turbulence that came out of them. But here we have a new design of port that really works very well, with no audible chuffing and an exceptional dispersal of any turbulence. The drivers themselves are also very impressive, and whilst the mid driver doesn't quite reach the clarity of ATC or the Volt mid driver found in higher end PMC, Quested and Kerr acoustic models, it is nonetheless very good indeed, and leagues ahead of the cheap Vifa mid-range driver found in the ever popular K&H or Neumann 0300s. Stereo imaging is also excellent, with subtle pan movements instantly apparent, but despite spending several hours tweaking placement with these in the room, I did find a sense of depth a little bit lacking. Now, this may well be down to the inherent design of the horizontal cabinet and better addressed by the V version. A narrower vertically oriented cabinet can often give a greater sense of depth and three-dimensionality, and with hindsight, if there was anything I would change about our SCM 200s, it would be to have all of the drivers in a vertical line in a narrower cabinet. Should have bought the hi-fi version. This is very apparent when listening to the Kerr acoustic K100s. Here we have sensational drivers arranged vertically in a relatively narrow cabinet, and the sense of depth and the sphere of three-dimensional audio that comes out of these is quite simply better than anything else I've ever heard in the history of ever. But back to that DSP for a minute, and it's actually here that lies a secret weapon of the S series that very few other reviewers seem to be talking about. I heard a noticeable jump up in the performance of these monitors when going in via the AES input. This bypasses two conversion stages, the one out of my converters and the one in the S3H. And whilst my digital to analog converters are extremely neutral and have to be for mastering work, I felt that the conversion stage in the S3H when going in via the analog XLR, whilst very good and well up to modern standards, was noticeably different to it not being there at all. When I fed an AES signal into these, your digital audio, it feeds straight into the DSP engine and bypasses that conversion stage, and to my ears at least, everything just got a little bit better. And if you own a pair of Adam S series monitors, or if you're auditioning a pair with a view to buying them, then I would strongly recommend that you try sending your signal to them directly via AES. To my ears, in a critical listening environment, doing so just sounded like a cheap piece of gear had been removed from the signal path, and it gave a noticeable hike upwards in quality and performance, and for free. So all in all, I've been very impressed with these monitors. Would I use them for mixing? Absolutely. I think they're an incredible mixing monitor, and they are worthy winners of the awards they have garnered. Would I use them for mastering? No, but I'm used to the ATC sound and working on monitors that are just a league above these in both performance and obviously price, and mastering is a very different discipline to mixing. But going back to mixing, and as a comparison to similar three-way horizontally oriented monitors, we had the chance to test out a pair of ATC SCM 45s at a recent visit to Peter Gabriel's Real World Studios, and they sound, well, pretty much the same as our SCM 200s, just a little bit smaller. The Adam sound just a little plasticky compared to the ATCs, and I think a lot of that is down to maybe the mid-range detail. The S3H are more comparable in price to the smallest of ATC three-way designs, the SCM 25, and the Adams win there on low end, and I think they probably win with the tweeter as well. But it's that famous ATC mid-range that they don't quite get close to. In the SCM45, it's a very close race between the lows and highs. The 45's featuring dual woofer power and ATC's new in-house tweeter design for the high end. But again, the mid-range just beats the Adams for me. But let's not forget the SCM45s cost a good few £1,000 more, and at the price these come in, I'd highly recommend the S3H for mixing. They are forgiving of positioning, offer a wide sweet spot, the drivers integrate seamlessly, they are very detailed and accurate, they have adequate low-end reproduction to be used without a sub, will sit happily atop a sturdy meter bridge, and if you can't perform a good mix on these, then it's not your monitoring that's the problem. For mastering, for me, you just need to go up a price bracket, and once you've heard the extra detail that comes from something like an ATC or something like these K100s, then you can't unhear it. Your room has to be at that level as well, and it kind of ruins you for life. But these are very, very impressive. The only real negative for me is the DSP. If you feel you need to tweak the low end in your speakers, then do that by optimizing your listening position for the low end first. It doesn't cost anything, and you can find out how to do that by watching the video on your screen now.